Show me your hands, I will kill you! Show me your hands! You were when I catch you! Give me your hands now! Give me your hands!
Show me your hands!
Show me your hands!
Put your hands behind your back!
Show me your hands! I will kill you!
Put your hands behind your back now!
Give me your hands!
Calvary, I think they're on foot somewhere.
A scream tears through the thick summer air of the forest, followed by the sickening, dry sound of metal slamming into flesh.
Show me your hands, I will kill you!
That threat didn't come from a gangster or a serial killer. It was roared from the throat of a man in uniform, wearing the badge of the Kentucky State Police. On the ground, a 20-year-old man had just been dropped by a taser, his hands raised in unconditional surrender. Blood seeped from shattered teeth, his eyes wide with pure terror as he realized the man standing over him was no longer a law enforcement officer, but something closer to an executioner driven by rage. There was no resistance, only punishment driven by something personal. So how thin is the line between maintaining order and becoming a criminal in uniform? Stay with me, because this is the most complete, detailed, and disturbing account of this dark incident. July 28, 2023. The Kentucky sky hung heavy with a gray sense of wrongdoing, the highway asphalt shimmering with heat. It started like a scene you've seen 100 times on the evening news, a stolen vehicle tearing down the interstate. Radio chatter crackled through Kentucky State Police channels. A stolen car fleeing at high speed. Behind the wheel, Robert Kidd, 20 years old. And then came the detail that changed everything. The one that flooded every listening officer with adrenaline. The suspect was believed to be armed. In law enforcement psychology, the word armed is a trigger, flipping on the most primal survival instincts. Heart rate spikes, pupils dilate, worst-case scenarios instantly flood the mind. One of the patrol cars in pursuit that day was driven by Officer Hayden Kilbourne. He wasn't a rookie. He understood the dangers of the road. But what he didn't realize in that moment was this. The adrenaline surging through him, if not controlled by discipline and respect for the Constitution, could become a poison. One that strips away the very humanity it's meant to protect. The moment the car jerked to a stop, before the dust had even settled, the door flew open. Robert Kidd burst out. At 20 years old, with the build of a young man staring down prison time, Kidd chose the worst possible option: to run. He climbed over the metal guardrail along the highway and charged straight into a dense, steep, wooded area. Under the law, this is called active fleeing. By running, Kidd stripped himself of the safety of standard arrest procedures. He turned the situation from a traffic stop into a manhunt. And Officer Hayden Kilbourne immediately became the hunter. Kilbourne rushed out of his patrol car, drew his weapon, his heavy footsteps crushing the roadside vegetation, and above all, the words coming out of a mind gradually losing control.
Hey, show me your hands! Show me your hands!
If Kilbourne had stopped there, he would have been doing his job. However, as the pursuit pushed deeper into the forest, where sunlight was blocked by thick canopies, the darkness seemed to begin creeping into the officer's mind as well. The setting was no longer an open highway under public view. They were in a silent forest, an isolated space. And in isolated spaces, the beasts tend to reveal themselves.
Show me your hands, I will kill you! Give me your...
From the perspective of the Fourth Amendment, a police officer is permitted to use deadly force if they have a reasonable belief that a suspect poses a threat of death or serious harm to the officer or others. If Kidd had turned around and pointed a gun, Kilbourne pulling the trigger would be lawful. However, shouting, "I'm going to kill you," while chasing the back of a fleeing suspect reflects a different psychological state. That is no longer a professional warning meant to maintain order. It is the roar of anger. It is the frustration of someone in power being challenged by someone beneath him, forced to sprint through the woods in pursuit. The foot chase drained both of them. At one moment, the distance closed. Kilbourne saw his opportunity. He drew his taser. Two barbed probes carrying 50,000 volts tore through the air and struck directly into Robert Kidd's back. That was the end of the escape. Kidd was taken down. His muscles convulsed violently under the electric current. He lay face down on the ground, completely unable to control his body for several seconds. Legally speaking, this action by Officer Hayden Kilbourne would still be protected in court. He was pursuing a suspect believed to be armed who was actively fleeing, and he used a taser to subdue him. If the video had ended here, Kilbourne might have received a pat on the back from his superiors and written a standard arrest report. But constitutional tragedy, the most horrifying violations of civil rights, always happen in the seconds after the threat has already ended. The highest legal standard in cases like this comes from the U.S. Supreme Court precedent, Graham versus Connor. It establishes that the use of force must be objectively reasonable based on three factors: the severity of the crime, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to safety, and whether the suspect is actively resisting or fleeing. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Kentucky, has repeatedly affirmed a principle drawn in blood. The Fourth Amendment prohibits police from using gratuitous and excessive force against someone who has stopped resisting. You are not allowed to punish someone for having fled. Police force is meant to control, not to punish. Punishment is the role of judges and juries. Back in the forest, Kilbourne had caught his prey. The cold metal baton was drawn. Robert Kidd understood the game was over. He had no gun in his hands. He tried to comply. Kidd slowly rolled onto his back, facing the officer, and clearly raised both empty hands into the air. It is the universal posture of surrender. But Kilbourne's eyes were now clouded by rage. Frustration, exhaustion from the chase, and a wounded sense of authority had turned him into an executioner. Despite Kidd having his hands raised in surrender, Kilbourne swung the steel baton, delivering brutal blows onto the suspect's body. As Kilbourne struck wildly with the baton, he continued shouting a meaningless command because Kidd's hands were already right in front of him. Look closely at that scene. That is not law enforcement. It is a violent and cowardly street assault carried out under the cover of a badge. Kilbourne orders the suspect to put his hands behind his back. But how can a human being obediently move their hands behind their back while a steel baton is repeatedly striking their face? The natural reflex of any living being under attack is to raise their hands to shield vulnerable parts of the body. Kilbourne created a perfect trap of abuse, ordering the suspect to do something that goes against survival instinct while simultaneously beating him to force that instinct to activate, then using that very act of shielding as justification to keep beating him. 7 stitches on the upper lip, severe bruising across the face and chest, broken teeth. That was the bloody bill Robert Kidd had to pay for Hayden Kilbourne's rage. But the horror of this story does not end with Kilbourne's baton strikes. A single monster is one thing, but when society watches that monster act and does nothing, the entire system is rotten. While Kilbourne was violently striking a man who had already raised his hands in surrender, there was a second figure standing right there. Officer Jake Noel. He arrived on the scene just moments after Kilbourne. Noel's body cam captured the entire incident from the clearest angle. And what did Noel do? He stood and watched. Under the policies of most modern police departments in the United States, and according to court rulings, officers have a duty to intervene. When an officer witnesses a colleague using excessive, unconstitutional force, they are not allowed to look away. They must step in
grab their colleague, pull them back, and say, "That's enough. Stop." But Noel did not move. He stood there like a spectator watching a bloody gladiator match, enabling evil in the name of blind brotherhood, so-called thin blue line.
In later filings, Robert Kidd's attorney strongly condemned Noel's cowardice, noting that to this day, Officer Jake Noel has faced no internal discipline or criminal charges for standing by while a crime occurred right in front of him. He still wears that uniform. A slap in the face of justice. When Kilbourne's rage subsided, the forest returned to its natural silence. The cold handcuffs snapped onto Robert Kidd's wrists, now limp and covered in blood. The young man was dragged away, thrown into the back seat of a patrol car like a sack of torn flesh. The booking process followed. Paperwork was filled out. Reports were written. And as is often the case with those who abuse power, the initial report attempted to distort the truth. But they forgot one thing. The mechanical eye of the body cam does not lie. It records every frame, every sound, without bias, without emotion. On August 2nd, 2023, after leadership of the Kentucky State Police gathered in a dimly lit room, the glow of a projector casting tension across their faces, they reviewed the footage from Kilbourne and Noel. Silence filled the room. No matter how much they might have wanted to protect their own, the images were undeniable. A clear crossing of the line. The commissioner, Colonel Philip Burnett Jr., understood that if this was not addressed, the entire agency would face a storm of public outrage and multi-million-dollar civil rights lawsuits. An internal administrative investigation was immediately launched, concluding that Kilbourne had used excessive force. But KSP did not let it stop there. They took it a step further. Criminal charges against their own officer. In September 2023, Hayden Kilbourne's world collapsed. He was handcuffed by fellow officers, the same cuffs he once used on others. Prosecutors charged him with 2 serious crimes: second-degree assault for the brutal baton strikes causing injury, and third-degree terroristic threatening for shouting, "I'm going to kill you," in the woods. Kilbourne's weak resistance began. He clung to his badge, requested a hearing to keep his job, resulting in a 6-month unpaid suspension. But as the criminal case grew stronger and the video remained undeniable, Kilbourne knew he was cornered. On January 13, 2026, he resigned, permanently stripped of the uniform he had disgraced. Just 1 day earlier, on January 12, 2026, faced with overwhelming evidence, former Kentucky State Police officer Hayden Kilbourne bowed his head in court and formally pleaded guilty. The judge's gavel came down. Sentence: 5 years in prison. From a man who hunted criminals, Kilbourne became one. He is now held at the Laurel County Detention Center, breathing the stale air behind bars, where he will remain at least until November 2029, with a slim chance of parole in February 2027. His right to serve as a police officer has been permanently revoked. A bitter but fitting end for extreme arrogance. As for Robert Kidd, the law does not excuse his wrongdoing simply because he was a victim of police violence. The court punished his actions: first-degree fleeing or evading police, wanton endangerment, possession of a stolen vehicle, and marijuana possession. He pleaded guilty and received a 3-year sentence. But the legal story does not end there. In October 2023, another powerful legal action was filed in federal court. A civil rights lawsuit. Kidd's attorneys are bringing Kilbourne, and possibly the system itself, into the light of civil law, seeking compensation for permanent physical and psychological damage. Even in prison, Kidd remains a U.S. citizen, and the Fourth Amendment protects him, even as an offender. This lawsuit now hangs over Kilbourne like a sword of Damocles, awaiting judgment. Stepping back to view this entire picture of blood and mud, what remains is a chilling feeling running down the spine. To me, this is not simply a story about a bad cop or a villain, nor is it about an innocent victim crushed by the system. It is a costly lesson about the corruption of power and the constitutional red lines that no one is allowed to cross. Robert Kidd was wrong, completely wrong, to steal a car, to drive recklessly on a highway, and to make the fatal mistake of running into the woods. That stupidity deserved punishment, and he is paying with 3 years of his youth behind bars. Society needs brave officers to stop individuals like Kidd and keep communities safe. But Hayden Kilbourne committed a far greater wrong. When you wear the uniform, you are no longer just an individual acting on emotion. You are the embodiment of the Constitution. Striking the face of a man who has already surrendered is not only an assault on human dignity, it is a violation of the very core values of America. Kilbourne did not enforce the law that day. He carried out revenge. He acted like a thug with a badge. The decision by KSP to remove and imprison their own officer is a rare bright spot, showing the system can still purge its rot. The 5-year sentence sends a clear message. No one, not even those who enforce the law, is above it. But what troubles me most, the true ghost haunting this system, is Officer Jake Knoll. We punish the perpetrator, but ignore the silent accomplice. How can we clean the system if officers who witness wrongdoing choose to stand by to protect the thin blue line? As long as that cowardice exists, more Kilbournes will continue to emerge. Give power to a person without cultivating their humanity, and you create monsters. What about you? Do you think a 5-year sentence is enough to deter conduct like Kilbourne's? And what should be done about officers who choose to stand by like Jake Knoll? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because honest discussions like this are the only way to keep the system accountable. See you next time.